Hey, this is Josh with Cultural Catholic coming at you with another episode in the India History mini-series. Um, like I said, it's been a while on my vlog video yesterday. Today I'll do a little bit of wrap-up on World War I and move into kind of like the interwar period, and then after that, it'll be the end of the video today. Um, so an initial thing with the Indian War effort um, is that it wasn't just in Europe. That's where a significant amount of their forces went, but that's not the only place. Since India is closer to the Middle East than it is to Europe, they did play a significant role in the Middle Eastern campaigns. Actually, early in the war, they were part of the military force that tried to take what is now Iraq from the Ottoman Empire, and they actually did a fairly good job until a few major setbacks that ultimately led to the siege of Kut by the Ottomans against the British and Indian forces there. It got really, really bad to the point that eventually they had to surrender, and when they had to surrender, they were out of food. A lot of soldiers were malnourished, and they were put in a forced march to prison camps, and a lot of them did not make it to the prison camps, and thus to the end of the war. But that was by no means the end of Indian involvement in the Middle East. More soldiers were sent there because it's a lot easier to bolster forces there than it was in Europe. And they not only they largely participated in going up the eastern Mediterranean basin. That especially became true when the infantry was moved there, and especially the cavalry near the end of the war. Another major place where Indian troops, well, not so much major, but the place where Indian troops and Indians as a whole participated in was in the Africa campaigns. These were fairly minor on the west, and in south west, those were taken care of largely by Anglo forces, so British and South African. In German East Africa, that was a little bit longer campaign. Indian forces did participate quite heavily in that. There was also Indian laborers who worked to improve transportation and logistics to make the war slightly easier, because a lot of the fighting in East Africa and German East Africa was along in the largely unsettled or lowly settled or lightly settled bush country. So there was a lot of work that had to be done to make it easier. Of course, a lot of labor was forced labor from African locals, which did not end out well for the peoples in that region. But another major place to look at would be India itself. India was a major agricultural production for the war effort. It would get even more so during the Second World War, and there were some famine issues that happened there, but that is, of course, next week's video. Additionally, a lot of Indian nationalists took this as an opportunity to kind of prove to the British that they can at least have some autonomy, like autonomous self-rule, like was supposed to happen in Ireland before the war broke out. So a lot of Indian nationalists, like Gandhi and God, American schools need to do better with this. Leader of the Muslim counterpart to the Indian to Gandhi's group. They were among those who thought that this was an opportunity to create autonomy within India, so that they could eventually get full self-rule and full independence. Of course, this was a little bit more unified, for lack of a better term, because the populations that were largely recruited were from what is now Pakistan and northern India. So a significant portion of the population did not participate, and a lot of letters that went to Europeans, soldiers in the European theater, and obviously other places, came from those who used this as a means to influence their countrymen, to kind of get them to think, well, if you're fighting for them to maintain their sovereignty, maybe this you can try to impress upon them the importance of our sovereignty, or at least self-rule. And actually, during the Paris Peace Conference at the end of the war, there was a lot of scuttlebutt about Wilson and his contributions. There's actually a really interesting book called the Wilsonian Moment, and I read a little bit of that for the paper that a lot of this information came from. Granted, I have consistently cited sources from the books that I utilized for that paper, so I'm not pulling it out of my ass or self-citing. But yeah, it was a lot. There was thought that this could be a moment for them to at least get autonomous rule at home, for them to make domestic decisions. Foreign decisions obviously would lie with the British government in England. Um, that was at least the hope at the time. Obviously, that did not happen, and it would take a full another 30 years before independence would occur. Um, so that was how how the Indians affected the war outside of Europe. Sorry, this isn't as extensive or as well researched. Um, Part of last week's issues was I didn't have a lot of time, and so I didn't have a lot of time to do research, and I also didn't have a lot of research pre-done because when I wrote the paper, I focused on Europe predominantly. But next week, I'll wrap up this mini series on India and then move on to some other random subjects. Maybe do another mini series later on down the road. Don't know. This is Joshua with Cultural Catholic signing off.